As a wargamer, whatever the system is, we've got the list. This idea, you've got an army, a faction, an armada, and you build a list, selecting miniatures, selecting units, selecting elements, and that's what we bring to the tabletop to try and win the mission and layer over the mission. So the list is this great idea that communicates what am I going to try and do on the tabletop and how am I going to, in theory, do that on the tabletop, which is why, just to sidebar for a moment, I've pushed up some of these reviews to the Wargaming Tactics playlist here on the channel when we're setting up for a mission. So we set the terrain up at the club. We're getting our miniatures out. What mission do you want to play? Do you want to randomly roll for it, or is there something you feel like playing? We've agreed all that. We've got deployment zones set up, and now we're physically setting up our miniatures. I'm doing my best to look at what my opponent has in their list and say, based on those units and my understanding of the war game, what are they going to try and do? What's the plan? How am I going to counter that? So the list is a great, great starting point. Now, we've got that framework, ways to build lists, different configurations. So taking your miniature collection, and over time, of course, it grows, and configuring it in different ways, not only to fit your player personality, but sometimes to do something a little bit different or experiment in different areas. So with this list type, we explored attack, defense, and support. I pushed that up to the channel under the Wargaming Tactics playlist. We've been looking at some different list buildings, and these are overall concepts. They work with any system, any war group, any type of army, armada, battle force, skirmish band, war band, whatever you're going to play. This list I call the phase overload. The phase overload. If it works, it's glorious. It's absolute tabletop glory. If it doesn't work, you're going to get crushed. It is very, very binary, right? With how it works, you got to be all in or all out. You've got to have that tabletop guts to make it happen. So within that, what you're going to do is what we see with most war games outside of historical wargaming. Historical wargaming, it's really about here's one side, here's the other side. We recreate the battlefield as it was in the day, and we sit down and play as generals, tabletop generals, asking the question, hey, if I was in command, what would I do? How would this battle play out? And often with that, the sides are already predetermined, predefined, and they're not always fair, depending on the historical time period and what we're looking at. I mean, ideally, all of warfare shouldn't be fair. But modern tabletop gaming, there's this idea of a buy-in, a point system, a scale, where I have my army, you have my army. There's all sorts of different units, but we agree to a point value ahead of time. We see this in BattleTech with battle value. Let's play a 5K battle value game, 5,000 point game, and you buy mechs and infantry and tanks, and you customize the list. So you and I can have very, very different lists, but we have a same overall value, and it's somewhat fair to bring to the tabletop, somewhat balanced. So a phase overload list is where you take all that currency, battle value, squadron points, gold coins, C-bills, points, support points, whatever it's going to be, and you overload one aspect of the game. You dump all those points into one aspect of the game, and you look to take your opponent apart based on that aspect because they can't counter it. But if they can, you got a problem because you got nothing else. So a couple of examples. Sometimes you see in a lot of game systems, it'll be like a movement phase and then like a shooting phase and then maybe a charge and close combat type phase. We see this with chain of command. You're moving around, you're firing, you declare charges. So the idea is maybe I take all those points and I put it all into the movement. Everything is mech'd up. Everything is super fast. Everything's flying around on the tabletop, teleporting, whatever it's going to be. I'm building that armada. I'm taking the lightest, fastest ships possible. What that means is I have such extreme maneuverability that I can be anywhere on the table in one turn. I will be attacking your blind arcs, your rear armor, staying out of your big guns. I'm taking all of my army, whatever that is, all those points, moving it to one area. So if I've got 10 ships, those 10 ships move. They fire on one or two of your ships that they've isolated. They move away. Everything is into the movement phase. But if you can counter that in some way, I'm in a lot of trouble. But this idea of by overloading all of my points into that one area, you can't, because I'm going to overload you. Another example might be a shooting phase. Lots of artillery, lots of guns. I castle up in the corner of the board, and I just blow stuff up. If I had a magic-based army, then I pour all my points into magic, and I just out-magic you. The idea is, now you got to be all in. It's not like, well, I'll do the magic, but, look, I'll take a group of heavy knights just to protect my flank. Like, no, all in phase. A phase of the game you're overloading. You're trying to overload your opponent's resistance to it, their ability to counter, and everything. Now, I've had some very successful armies through the years that have done this, that have been able to accomplish this. A few that I've even brought to tournaments, because a lot of players will bring counters for certain elements, but they also don't know what that element is. So maybe I've got a little anti-magic, maybe I've got some maneuverability, maybe I've got some support, or they're looking to play a certain mission. Phase overload ignores all that, catching your opponent by surprise. But if they can counter, you'll be in a lot of trouble. So I'm not saying play like this all the time. One of the things that we're trying to do with our wargaming system and our wargaming collection is grow our collection, grow our system, and based on our player personality, say these are the type of units I like to play, but be able to mix and match your list. Be able to try new things. Be able to adapt and get the absolute most out of our miniature collection. So as an example, going back to this idea of the list and what your army is going to do, there are different ways to build lists in different configurations that are going to give you that variety.